for first two lectures, we'll continue with the basics, and from the next week, we will start with the actual contents. So I hope you are clear with what is service orientation, right? So let us start with that before I share my slide, right? So can anyone tell me what is a service in general? What is a service? Yes. When we say that we are providing a service, what does that mean? Yes, providing some functionality to the user. That's correct. A service is one which solves a particular problem. Perfect, perfect. Yes. So basically, service means we have to serve, right? Some aspect. Okay. And in the lab yesterday also, you tried to design first the functional requirements, and then from the functional requirements, you tried to find the services that can be reusable in nature. We can call them, and whenever it is called by multiple clients even, then it will be able to support. So that is what we mean by services initially. Fine. Now if I go in further detail, right, if you want to say that something is an architecture, right, so what do you mean by that term, architecture? Yes, anyone? Something is an architecture of a building, so what can we say about that? The way it is organized, very good. Yes. Blueprint, very nice. Yes. Or we can say model. Yes. Exactly, right? So basically, we are going to learn how we can design standardized web services, right? Again, you will find similarity with software engineering subject also, because as we follow standard procedures in software engineering, similarly for service orientation, we are required to have standard procedures, standard principles. Fine. And at the end, we will be able to build up a model. Fine. So if you want to be a service orientation architect, right, this will be an important subject for you, right? Because whatever we'll be covering, that will be giving you the basic idea, right? What is there in services, what kind of logic should be there in services, right? And how we can design an efficient solution, service oriented solution. So let us go through the slides now, right? I'll just share it. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. Fine. Can you see the title slide, all of you? Yes. Okay. Okay. Fine. So basically, this subject name is service-oriented computing, but what we are going to study inside in depth will be is called service-oriented architecture, right? Computing involves programming also, while architecture is a model basically, right? So the this subject has two sides of coin, right? So have you had a lecture from PMJ sir for SOC? Yes, right. So you know that there is one side which is programming part, right? So PMJ sir might have started with XML, right? Am I correct? With XML and the basics. Okay, okay, fine. So XML is going to form the foundation for my topics also. Fine. So we have divided the subject in two parts. One is conceptual part and other is the implementation part. In conceptual part, we will be studying what is SOA, how we can design efficient SOA, right? What are the different techniques? What are the different standards currently used in industry, right? For that matter. So that is what I will be covering. Fine. And as I said, the base of that is software engineering, right? So we are required to just revise basic knowledge, right, of SE. That will be useful over here. And the other side where you will be learning, right now you started learning XML, then you will move on to learning SOAP based services, right? That is known as WCF service, right? Windows Communication Foundation. That is one of the standard web service design technique, right? The second method or second type of services that you will study is called RESTful services, right? So SOAP and REST are two paradigms used in service orientation industry, and it is good that you will be learning both the aspects, right? So that portion will be covered by PM Jasar, and I'll be covering you the concepts, right? So we have a textbook, fine, from where we are going to cover 8 chapters throughout the syllabus, right? So this person will be our guide, who is known as Thomas Hull. He is the father of SOA, you can say, right? Thomas Hull and some other people found the concepts of SOA, and then he has written this book just like a Bible. Fine. So the title, I hope it is readable. Service-oriented architecture, concepts, technology, and design. Right? Is it readable to you all? Title? Yes. Okay. And the author is Thomas Hull. Publisher is Pearson. Now, whatever edition you get, that will be fine. But as I said, we'll be following 8 chapters from this. Right? I'll also be sharing my slides. I've already shared on the classroom for the first 2 lectures, and I'll be following this throughout. All right, up to the last third sessional phase as well, right? So we are going to cover around 3 chapters in the first sessional phase. 2 more chapters will be covering in second sessional, and 2 or 3 more in the third sessional. That is how the plan is, right? So let us start. Before SOA, how the architecture looked like, right? So as you can see over here, the design was a closed design. Closed, whenever you have a closed design, that means it does not have chance to grow. It does not have chance to grow, right? And it is also monolithic in nature. Can anyone tell me what is monolithic? Monolithic and microkernel, these concepts you might have come across in basics of OS also, right? Everyone at one place. Yes, that's correct. That is, everything is designed inside a single module, we can say, right? But can we say it is a good design if you are designing everything as a monolithic or a single unit? What are the problems that will be there on the left hand side? If load increases, that system will fail. Yes, and the complexity will also be high. Yes. Anything else? So you can see the example: service scheduling, order processing, right? There is check customer status, not efficient use of resources. Correct, right? So basically, this is old design technique, right? And it is brittle in nature. Why it is brittle? Yes, can anyone tell me this design is why brittle in nature? Brittle means it can break, right? If there is extra load in the system, if you try to add one more function, it might break. Yes, exactly. If one breaks, everything breaks. That's correct, General. Right? So instead of that, if I take out each and every component, let us say customer status, verify customer credit, order status, if I make all these as services, right, can they grow independently? Yes or no? Right? Instead of making it a monolithic design, I will go with a microkernel design. Microkernel means everything is having a single functionality, right? Yes, you will be mostly targeting heavy services. Heavy service means CRUD-based services. Like in lab yesterday, you might have designed services, right? Which are following CRUD operations, right? So there will be some CRUD-based services and there will be some simple services. But basic goal is we are targeting reusability and extensibility. Reusability means the service should be able to call from throughout the world, right? There should not be a burden that, or you can say restriction, that it can be called from only one type of client or something like that, right? Plus, it should be also serving the purpose, right? So, this is the difference. Before SOA, we are having closed, monolithic, and brittle architecture. After SOA, we are having shared services. It is a collaborative nature, interoperable. That means platform independent, right? And integrated. Okay. So that is the approach we are having. Are you clear with this difference, basic difference? So that is what we are going to target over here, right? So what is meant by being service oriented? That is the first term, right? First of all, if we are designing everything as a single unit, as I discussed earlier, it can fail, right? So it's better to divide the logic. We use divide and conquer approach, right? Divide the logic in such a way that every part of the logic can evolve on itself, right? Suppose I am having three modules combined in one, right? Three modules combined in one. Rather than that, if I go with three individual modules, right, that would be better, right? If I go with three individual modules, that will be better. So that is what we are doing. We have to learn such techniques by which we divide the logic in such a way that every unit can be independent. Okay, so let us go through this. Logic required to solve a large problem can be better constructed, carried out, and managed if it is decomposed into a collection of smaller and related pieces. Yes, if a service grows to big extent, it might become monolithic in itself. Yes, that is true, Janil. But still, it will be focusing on its own functionality, right? It won't be adding extra functionality or something which is not in your scope. Are you getting? Right. So still, it will be able to hold well, right? Only the size and the number of operations will grow, but the domain will not be crossed. Are you getting the point? Right? So that is the essence, right? So basically, there are some keywords over here. Let me just focus on that. Constructed, carried out, and managed, right? So constructed and managed, if I focus on these two terms, what is the or how we can make the maintenance of the system easy? In SE, we have seen that, right? Can anyone tell me how the maintenance efforts can be reduced for any software? Loose coupling, yes. Minimum dependency, that's correct, right? So loose coupling can only be achieved when your design is good. Yes or no? When your design is good. Okay. So basically, if I divide my logic in such a way that the logic is clearly partitioned, right? And that's what is written over here, decomposed into smaller and related pieces. Now, yes, the units will be smaller, but why they are related? Because ultimately the units will have to call each other, isn't it? Can we have independent services, totally independent services? Is that kind of architecture possible? Suppose you have an order system, right? That order has to invoke the product service, right? Because for getting the product details, it has to go through the product details, right? So they will be related, but the dependency will be minimum. Okay, and that's what we mean by loose coupling, okay, or minimum coupling. Each of the piece, right, addresses a concern or a specific part of the problem. So whatever divisions which we make, each division will be responsible for only one aspect, right? It will be responsible for only one thing. Okay. Now, this is not a new concept, right? In standard divide and conquer or even in distributed computing, right? We are using this. And if you are aware about client server, there also we are using decomposition, right? In client server, how do we have decomposition? Can anyone tell me? It is a role-based decomposition. It is not a logic-based decomposition, right? So what is the goal of server in a client server system? What is the goal of server for a client server? Process the request, correct. Accept the request, process the request, and reply. That's it, right? And what client has to do? What is the client's responsibility? Yes. What is the responsibility of client? Anyone? To send requests, obviously, right? So where there is a burden, on which side there is a burden? Is it on the client side or on the server side? Yes, obviously on the server side, right? So can I say that that is a good way of decomposition, role-based decomposition? I hope you are getting, right? What if server fails, right? And backup is not there, your entire system will crash, right? So the first design that was found earlier was called client server, but then people realized that it has some basic flaws, and that is why SOA came up. So how SOA differs, we are going to see in very much depth. Chapter number 4 of this textbook covers the differences. SOA versus client server, SOA versus distributed architecture, all these things we'll be studying in detail. Fine. So SOA differs from other approaches in the manner in which the separation is achieved. That means how we divide our logic, right? And basically for that, we use some principles, and they are known as service orientation principles. I'll also cover them, if not today, but tomorrow, we might be able to reach that, right? So service orientation principles form the foundation over here, fine? So what is the real world example of service orientation? So what you observe in this figure, what is the observation? There is a market, right? But what is the observation that you make? Yes. Any guesses are fine, right? All shops are distributed in different places. Yes, different shops provide different services. Very good, very good. Services, serving and selling, very nice. Services are provided by vendors to customers. Correct, correct. Separated counter. Sellers are like server, customers as client. Very good, very nice observation, right? So basically, if I view this market from the top, can I say that this is a single unit as a market? As a market, it is a single unit, right? But if I zoom in further, if I visit the market, I can see individual outlets, right? I can see individual outlets. Are you following what I'm saying, right? When we look at from the top, we can see one individual entity, one individual market, right? If I zoom inside, I can see the further details, right? So why these businesses, which you can see, are not combined together? Why they are not? Why they are running different shops? What is the purpose? Yes, why they are running different shops? Why they are not running together? Any reasons? Can you give me? Yes, anyone? Okay, suppose if I plug these gaps together where the people are walking, right? I want to provide, don't have competition, okay, own functionality, provide different functionalities. Yes, they have their own products, right? To decrease the cloud, very good, right? So all the observations are correct. So basically, there will be less scope of growth for independent store if you combine. Do you agree? The scope of growth will be limited for individual organization or individual shop if you combine. Yes or no? Right? Okay. If I give you another example, suppose you take example of another market where there are shops for, let us say, hardware parts like wood and all those things, right? Another shop which is selling the plumbing material, right? Plumbing materials, right? So likewise, you are having a market where there are number of you can say different businesses. Fine. So if they are working as a separate shop, they can grow their business independently. That is one point. Okay. But what is the other benefit, right? Or does that mean that hardware shop will not be requiring plumbing services? Is that so? Hardware shop will not be requiring plumbing services? No, right? So they will require, right? Obviously, sometimes if the you can say pipe breaks, they have to call the plumbing server. But are you getting the analogy that I'm trying to show you? Wherever required, we will call the plumbing. Are you getting? Wherever required. will be calling the plumbing, right? So what is not there in this scenario between the hardware shop and between the plumbing service? Yes, we are having call on demand. So what we are avoiding by doing this? Try to think and answer. Dependency. Very good. Or basically, we don't have to remain connected with that shop throughout the lifetime, right? Wherever required, you call it. Yes or no? Yes. So similar thing we require in software, you can say also, or in services. Similar concept is required in services. Okay. So services should be dependent only for calling purpose, right? Wherever required, you call that service. But where the dependency should not be there? In which aspect? Now come back to programming, right? From the market. In which aspect the dependency should not be there? In terms of logic, right? It should not be like that one function you have written in one service and the other function you are writing in the other service, right? Are you getting the point, right? Yes, correct, Janil, right? So that is what is our target. Design such a solution that provides us the best efficiency, right? With minimum coupling, okay? So this is just a textual description of what I showed you, right? So let us go through it. A city has many service-oriented outlets, right? Why they are service-oriented? Because they are providing different functionalities, different services, right? Now, each outlet provides a distinct service to many customers, right? It is one-to-many relationship, right? One shop has many customers. Collectively, these outlets will form a business community, right? And we have answered this question, why do we need different outlets, right? So that they can grow on themselves, they can be independent, right? And what should be the amount of dependency among outlets? Can anyone answer this second one? What should be the amount of dependency between the outlets? Yes. Very less, or you can say just for calling, right? Whenever required, we should call, right? We should not remain connected. Okay, that is what is essence, right? Okay, so in real world, we can see service orientation, and that is where the idea came up of designing service-oriented architecture, right? And that is how this SOA was designed. So what you can see in double quotes is the standard textbook definition and easiest definition which you will ever find. Let us go through it once. It is a term that represents a model in which automation logic is decomposed into smaller and distinct units of logic, right? What do you understand by automation logic? Automation logic is equal to what in the programming part or in the program? It is your code, isn't it? Yes or no? Right? We have to divide the code in such a way that we are having smaller and distinct units of logic. Are you following this definition? Right? Am I making sense with this? Okay, okay. Individually, these units can be distributed. Right? Now, what do you mean by this term, distributed? When I say that I have divided my logic into three parts, and each of the three parts can be distributed, what does that mean? Yes, they can be used independently or they can be reused. Exactly. They can span multiple things. Correct, Preet. Right? So they can be shared with other architectures also. Fine. That is for individual behavior. And collectively, if you look at from top view, they form the large piece of logic, large piece of automation logic. Fine. Now there is an important statement which we have over here. So there are many technical terms you will be coming across throughout the subject, right? And that will be helpful to you to answer some interview questions as well. plus you will be clear with how to design an architecture, right? So this subject is going to be very useful for you, fine, in that sense. So let us go through this statement. Individual units exist autonomously. That means they exist independent of each other, yet not isolated from each other. Why so? Yet not isolated from each other. What does that mean? Yes, they are independent, more or less, that is true, but they are not isolated. That means they can be called whenever required. Are you following? Yes, yes, Janil. I meant to say that. Right? All of you understood? Fine. And what do we call these units of logic as? They are called services. Okay. See, we are not saying that as a web service. So, what should be the difference between service and a web service? Service is a concept, while web service is nothing but the technical implementation, right? Or technological implementation. Got the difference, right? We are discussing at conceptual level, but in depth you are having, you can say, implementation level. Fine. So when you divide your logic according to service orientation principles, right, we will be able to avoid tight connections, right? Because if you have tight connections, there will be dependencies. Dependencies will make your maintenance complex, right? And there will be a lot of issues. Okay. It allows them to evolve and grow relatively independent, right? That's what we said earlier. But for doing that, we have to follow some baseline conventions and principles. So that is what we'll be covering in upcoming lectures. What are the standards that we can use and what are the principles? Okay. I will also take some real world examples. So it will not be just theory. We are going to cover this subject with practical examples of real world, right? Of real applications, I would say. Right? Okay. So what are the real world examples of units of logic? So for example, if it is, let us say, online shopping domain. So what are the services you can find which can be reusable? I'm giving you a specific requirement, reusable. Yes, customer account can be created, it can be updated, right? Deleted. Product, yes, very good. So product can have CRUD operations, order can have CRUD operations, payment, yes, payment can be a small level service, but yes, it is a valid service, right? So there can be number of services which will contain only one or two operations, and there will be a number of services which will contain CRUD operations. Are you following? Right? Like order has CRUD operation, product has CRUD operation, right? Customer has CRUD operations, right? Yes, tracking of orders will be a part of your order system, right? Or order service, right? That's what we can do. Fine. So for any system, first goal is, and that is why you had a lab yesterday, you should be able to find out meaningful services from any domain, right? That was the goal of your first lab. Fine. Okay. Now let me go through the examples that I'm going to cover throughout this entire subject. Fine. Thomas Hall has given very good, you can say, service examples. We don't have to take examples from outside the world. You can just go with the textbook. So let me just describe this scenario. There are two companies, right? You can see two boxes. Each box represents one company. One is a Railco, right? So Railco is basically a supplier, right? Who supplies the railway related parts, right? So Railco is the supplier. Let us understand the role first, right? I'll be using these examples throughout the syllabus, right? So please remember, whenever I explain any service and its task, you just try to remember so that wherever I call that we will use ledger service, for example, you should have in mind that what ledger service is doing, right? Okay. Another company that we have is a buyer, obviously, right? There is a supplier buyer relationship we are having, and buyer is TLS, right? Over here. Clear with these two concepts at least? I'll go in detail now, right? Okay. It is going to be interesting, right? Because we are going to cover example based theory, right? So that is what will be making this interesting. Fine. So wherever you want to buy something, right? What is required first? Let us think about a business scenario. What is required first? Let us say you want to buy some parts from some company. What is required first? Product name, yes. Product quantity, or I would say product details. Yes, yes, correct, Harsh. Right. So basically, whenever we go to market, right, we go with a list. Okay. So that is what in business domain is known as purchase order, right? Can you see this service in middle, purchase order service on right hand side, in center basically, right? So purchase order service is responsible for what? For generating the order details which I want to place. Okay. And purchase order will have the GST number and everything, right? It is a formal document basically, right? So purchase order has to be sent to the supplier, has to be sent to the supplier. Now we require a service that will catch that purchase order, isn't it? We require a service that will catch that purchase order. Okay. So there are two services on left hand side. Can you find out which service will be accepting your purchase order from the name? Order fulfillment. Okay. Yes, Keval. What about others? Anyone else would like to guess? There are only two services, right? So it is not difficult to guess. You can also write in short order, right? If you are clear. So purchase order will be sent to order. That is correct. Fine. So I need to send my purchase order to the order fulfillment service. Now, what order fulfillment service has to do? Can anyone throw some light on this service, order fulfillment? Yes. Check the stock. Correct. Correct. Right. If stock is available, what it has to do next? What it has to do next? If stock is available. See, we have written this kind of scenarios in UML diagrams, if you remember, right? A use case diagram. I'm just trying to revise that, right? Because again, for your projects that you will carry out, SDPs and all, you will have to prepare your diagrams. So make sure that you remember, right? Yes, shipping, correct. So order fulfillment, if it is available in stock, you will be starting the shipping job. And shipping is generally an offline task, so we don't have a service for that. I hope you agree, right? Do we require a service for shipping management? No, right? Correct. Okay. Now, but after the items are shipped, are we shipping the items for free? Obviously not, right? Yes, payment. So, what we need to send to the client? What we need to send to the client? Invoice or bill, correct, right? So invoice submission service will now take up the role. Okay, it will generate the invoice of so and so amount, right, of whatever items that you produced. Fine. And it is going to submit that invoice on the uh, right hand side. Okay, now give me the name of the service. I hope it is readable, right? Service names to you. Can you just read out the name of service that will accept the invoice or bill? Accounts payable service. Correct, 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 right? So try to guess what account payable service will do. I'm giving you a minute. Try to guess. Try to guess and write down that in chat. What accounts will do? Try to write down a description, a little bit description. Okay, check amount present in one's account and deduct accordingly, verify order and make payment, check invoice and proceed to make payment, check and verify the amount, check account balance. Correct, correct, fine. So basically you will be verifying the invoice. That is the first step that you will do. Okay, once that is done, right, then what you are supposed to do is, next step is about going with the payment. Fine. So first of all, account service will make the payment. Fine. It will make sure that payment is made. After payment is made, right, we have to update our records for the payment, right? Yes or no? That is, we made so and so payment, that this was the transaction number and so on, right? For that, we have a service called Ledger. I hope you can read that name on the screen, right? Ledger service. Okay. So account service will be calling the ledger service for updating the database basically. Fine. But before that, how will you fetch the vendor details? Because you have to make the payment, right? How will you fetch the vendor details? Can you find out a service? Yes, yes, right. Vendor profile is a service that will give you the vendor details. Fine. Now, whenever you are making a payment, it has to follow certain rules and regulations, right? Or wherever you are doing a business activity, it has to follow certain rules and regulations. So for checking with the rules, we have a policy service, internal policy service, right? That is going to define the rules of payment and everything, right? Fine. Assume that everything is done, payment is done, and we have also updated the ledger. What still remains? What is the last step? Yes. Can you guess what is the last step? Yes. Sending a notification to the supplier that we have got, we have made the payment. That's correct. And all of you are understanding the scenario that I'm trying to describe, right? Okay, okay, good. Fine. Now we have covered almost all services except load balancing. Can anyone throw some light what role it will be playing? Load balancer. Yes. Take shipment. Okay. So I think you are taking the other side of the coin. You are correct. All of you are correct in that sense. But basically, uh, I'll throw more technical light on this. Load balancer is basically responsible for managing the load on the server. Yes, distributing the load on the server, right? Because see, wherever we are having a business domain, is it possible that you will be buying parts from only one supplier? Is it so? No, right? So you will be buying different parts from different people, right? And at the same time, account service will be receiving multiple invoices. Is it possible? Account service will be receiving multiple. So if there is too much load on the account service, what we need to do? If there is too much load on the account services, yes, we require another instance, or we need to make it wait. We need to make the request wait. Okay, and who will take care of that in this particular scenario? Load balancer. Understood? Right? Okay, so that is the purpose of load balancer. So this is a real world example. This is how the services interact, right? I have not drawn the connection between services right now, but I hope you understood how the services are acting, right? Understood is a complete scenario, right? So from time to time, I will revisit the same example for different situations. So please remember, right? Uh, Before we proceed, fine, in that topic. Okay. Now, let us go in depth of SOA. Okay, first a call is made to load balancer or direct service. Yes, that's a good question, General. First, your call will be, it is made to account service only, but it will be taken by load balancer. I hope you are getting right. It is sitting in between. Okay, I'll repeat. You are going to submit your invoice to account service. Is that clear? You are going to submit to account service, right? But before that invoice reaches the account payable service, it will be interrupted by load balancer. Understood that? Yes, yes, middleware. Yes. You can say intermediary service. I'm going to cover those topics in next week in detail. Understood, Janil? So it is acting as a intermediary, like an agent, right? In other words, okay. If the server is free, if the account payable service is free, then only you will be transferring that request. Otherwise, you will make it wait. Okay, that is the essence of this. Okay, fine. Okay, understood, Jenny? Yes. Okay, fine. Now the question is, in each service, how can I store my logic? In each service, how can I store my logic? So if you try to look at a flow chart, which is given over here, in the center you can see a flow chart, right? So flowchart has a set of steps. For each small step, I can design a service. You can see for process step, there is a service on the left hand side. For each process step, I can design a service. Okay. Another option is for one path, you can see this right hand side path where we are checking a condition and then we have a process, right? For this right hand side path, we can design a service. Okay. And the third option is for the entire process, I can design a service. So which one is better according to you? Designing a service for each step, designing for intermediate steps or combined steps, or for the entire system? Which is a better approach? Each step, intermediate. Okay. If you go with each step, then there will be too many services. I hope you agree, right? And it is possible that steps might be related to each other. Yes or no? So will that cause dependency to some extent? Yes. So what are the two options left? We go with intermediate logic or we go with highest level. But if you go with highest level, then again, what is the problem? If you go with highest level, that is if you combine the entire logic in one, then what is the problem? Complexity. Yes. And again, it becomes monolithic, right? So ideally, we should break out. Yes, we should break out and decide what kind of logic we can store in the service. But all three are valid options. We cannot say that any one of them is invalid. Are you clear? Yes or no? How service encapsulates the logic? There are three options, right? We go with small scale, intermediate, or process level, right? That is written in this slide. Let us go through that. Service can encapsulate varying amount of logic. It can be a small process step, either it can be a sub process or a collection of steps or an entire process, right? There are three options. Fine. So can we go ahead? Are you fine up to this? Okay, good. Thank you. Now, next question. We already discussed earlier that services cannot be totally independent. They have to call each other. Fine. So for calling purpose, what is required? If you want to call, let us say there is a service A, you can see that on the left hand side. Service A has to call service B, right? Now, at least at minimum, at bare minimum, what should I know about service B? Think as a programmer. At bare minimum, what should I know for service B? Yes. Suppose this is invoice service and there is the account service, right? Argument, or you can say at least the function and their signatures. Function and their signatures. Yes, Janil? First of all, we need to know that service B is present, right? Yes, that is correct. It is present, we assume, right? And then we need to know that what are the function it is providing so that we can call. Okay. Now, are we going to have the list of all services in the world? Is it practical? Is it practical to have the all services of world? No, right? Not possible. So what is the easiest solution? Every service should provide a document that is called service description. Every service should provide a document that is called service description. In SOA terms, this is called a WSDL file, right? Or WSDL. It is pronounced as WSDL, but it is written as WSDL. The full form is Web Service Description Language. Some people also say Web Service Definition Language, right? But basically, it describes your service. Okay. And as I said, what you need to describe for a service at bare minimum? Methods, parameters, and everything. Are you getting some idea? Right? So, if service A has to relate to service B, what is required first? Now I'm asking the direct question. If service A has to relate, or you can say it has to call service B, what is required? Its service description? Yes, its description, right? As I said, every service will have its description, and you can imagine that descriptions are stored in some repository, in some database, right? That is hosted on some server. Are you getting the idea? Right? Descriptions are stored somewhere on a repository. We will be discussing all these concepts in detail. Don't worry. Right? I'm just giving you some examples right now. Okay. So first of all, you have to obtain description, read that description, and then you invoke the service. Right? That is how we proceed. Are you clear with the process? How every service invokes the other service? Yes. Okay. So now we can answer. We can go in the theory part. For services to interact, they must be aware of each other. That is, I should know that this kind of service exists. So how can we get aware of other services? We can search for available service descriptions, isn't it? We can search for available service descriptions, yes or no? Right? And suppose I found 5 services with whom my requirements are matching. I found 5 services with whom my requirements are matching. So what you will do next? You will select the best one and you will communicate with that service, isn't it? Right? Okay. So first of all, we should be aware, right? Awareness is maintained through service descriptions, right? And what service description provides? It provides name, data expected and return, and method signature and everything. We are going to see a complete chapter on this, chapter 5, where we will see how the WSDL file is structured, right? What are the parts of WSDL file, right? So that when you will start studying WCF, you will get a clear idea, right? How WSDL files are generated. Okay, fine. Let us go for next. Now, which step is left? We have got the description, right? So what is next step? Yes, that's it. Call, right? For calling, these services are distributed over the internet, right? So I need to send a message or I need to send a request. Fine. So for that in SOA, we use standardized messages, right? And they are based on a protocol which is known as SOAP, right? The full form is Simple Object Access Protocol, right? This is a standard way of writing the request messages or as well as response messages, right? And if you're not aware, let me tell you, WSDL document or WSDL file as well as SOAP messages both are written in XML. And that is why you have started studying XML initially. You're getting the idea, right? So the WSDL file is structured in XML, right? As well as the messages that you send over the network, they are also designed using XML. Is that fine? Right? Yes, that will cover later, Kaushal. You can just wait until we cover the SOAP, because until you understand what is SOAP, you will not be clear with what is the difference, right? So we'll wait for some more time, right? Till we cover the SOAP technology. Yes, RPC is there, correct. But RPC is again point to point communication, where you have to maintain live connection, right? Which is not good, because if you are maintaining live connection, then you will be stateful. Yes, Preet? That is one more design technique. So actually, in earlier days, in distributed computing, RPC was being used. But now, when SOA is found, that has become obsolete, right? Because we try to maintain minimum coupling and statelessness. Statelessness, right? We don't remain stateful anymore, right? How do we do that? We'll see the details, right? Okay, so next step is how services communicate. Okay. So once you obtain description, you have to generate a SOAP message. And as the name says, it is called self-governing message, right? So when can one service be independent of other? When it does not maintain state. Yes or no? If you are maintaining the state information, you will be bound with the other service. Yes or no? I hope you are getting the point. Is that understood? Yes, sure. When you send a message, right, and until the reply comes, you wait for that message, let us say, right? Can I say that you are maintaining state information, right? Or you are being stateful? Okay. So, what is better, to remain stateful, or after sending the message, we should be able to send another message immediately? That is, we should remain stateless, which is going to be a more scalable design. Being stateful or being stateless? Being stateless, right? Correct. Okay, so if you want your service to be stateless, right, we have to write that information, state information, as well as some, you can say, routing logic and everything somewhere else. Are you getting? We have to write state information plus the routing information and everything somewhere else. Okay, and where you will be writing that? Yes, where you will be writing that? In the message. Okay, and that is why the message is known as self-governing. Messages in SOA are also called self-sufficient, right? As well as intelligent. Fine. So after a service sends a message, it will forget about that, because the state related information will be a part of your message itself, right? So wherever the receiver receives the message, it will know what is the context. Are you following the point? Right? Yes or no? I'll again repeat once, right? See, we want the services to be stateful, as free as possible, in other words, right? When can a service be as free as possible? Where after sending the message, it does not have to worry what happened to the message, right? So for that, we can't have dumb messages, right? We have to write intelligent logic in the message itself, so that in case of even faults, right? Even if the message is delivered to somewhere else or something like that, those problems can be sorted out. Okay. So for that, we require intelligent messages. So for communication, we use self-governing SOAP messages. This message is again written in XML. That is a way of communication. Fine. Let us now go through this slide that will make you clear. Services are designed to be stateless, right? Hence, once a service sends a message, it will lose the control over the message. Okay. But if service is losing the control, we have to store that part of logic in the message. Okay, so that is why messages should be fitted with self-governing logic. Making sense? Clear? Right. Okay, we missed one slide before this. Let us just cover that. Service descriptions help to achieve loose coupling between services. Do you agree with this statement? Service descriptions help to achieve loose coupling between services. What is the answer to this? If someone asks you to explain this statement, what will be the answer? This figure has the answer. Can you elaborate on that? Yes, where is the answer? Before you connect to the service, what do we do first? Before you communicate with the service, what is the first step that we perform? Obtain description, correct, right? So we are not connecting with the service directly, right? We first get description and then we connect. That is a way of achieving loose coupling, because if this service is not of my use, is there any point in connecting with that service? If I'm not going to utilize the functionality, is there any point in connecting to that service? No, right? So that is how we maintain loose coupling. Okay, do not connect the service directly. First get a description, read it, process it, and then send the SOAP message. Got the idea? Right? Okay. So once you are aware of each other, next aspect is to communicate, right? And this is provided by the messaging framework. And messaging framework uses SOAP protocol, right? Simple Object Access Protocol. Fine. So if I summarize the entire class, it is given in this particular slide. If you want to design an SOA, these are the three components we are having, right? First is service. Okay. So first we should focus how services should be designed, how the logic of the service should be designed. Second design aspect is how the description is designed. How the description is designed. Okay. Third design aspect is how the SOAP messages are designed. How the SOAP messages are designed, right? As I said earlier, description and SOAP both are written in XML. Okay. And services can be written in any of the programming language. Okay. So this slide covers the essence of whatever we have seen. Is the basic clear to all? Right? We have seen what is SOA first with a practical example. We have also seen the case study example with what are the possible services we can have in an ideal situation, right? Then we have seen the concept of service relation, service communication, and its descriptions. Okay, as I said earlier, we are going to study what is the structure of the WSDL file, what is the structure of the SOAP message, and everything, right? This we are going to see right away once we finish with the introduction. So if there is any doubt with that, it will be clear. Okay. So thank you. Let us stop over here. You can access the slides from the classroom. Right? Tomorrow we'll continue with the next slide. Okay. Let us end this session for today.